Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Please introduce our member. There are Dewi Neng Lisnawati, Friska and Shofi. And the title of our research is the correlation between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking ability. Introduction. Research background. Speaking is a tool to communicate with other people. It is an activity conducted by a person to communicate with others in order to express ideas, feelings, opinions, etc. It also used to share information among people, to negotiate, to solve problems, to maintain social relationships and friendship. Speaking is used by people almost every time to interact with others. Therefore, it is an essential skill to be learned by students in learning English. Speaking is a complex skill among the other three skills in English. No doubt that many students get difficulties in learning speaking, moreover, to practice it. To learn speaking skill is not only learning about the language itself, but also learning how to speak in a real communication. On the other hand, actually to get successful in learning speaking, students should be at the situation in which they are willing to speak in English. Besides, students also should have strength from inside to speak up. In other words, many factors affect students in learning speaking. One of factors affects students in learning speaking is motivation. Research question. What is the relationship between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking abilities? Research objective. To know the relationship between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking abilities. Hypothesis. No hypothesis. There is no correlation between student motivation in learning speaking and their ability. Alternative hypothesis. There is a correlation between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking ability.
Methodology, research design. The study used a quantitative correlation or cross-sectional approach. Population and sample. The population for this research are 120 students in 4 classes of senior high school, and the sample for this research are 13 students in 4 classes of senior high school. Instrument. The instrument used to collect data is questionnaire to obtain data on student motivation in learning to speak, and then oral test to determine speaking skill, which improve pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, fluency, and understanding. Data collection. The researcher give close-ended questionnaire and oral test in the form of a conversation. Data analysis. The data analysis using SPSS and Microsoft Excel.
And for the result, the formulation of test. In point 1, if the count bigger than 2 table, it means that the null hypothesis is rejected and there is significant correlation. In point 2, if the count lower 2 table, the null hypothesis is accepted and there is no significant correlation. Based on the conclusion above, the result is compared by the table in the significant. Therefore, the alternative hypothesis is accepted. In other words, there is significant correlation between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking ability. The proof, the result of hypothesis in this study, the writer conclude the obtained data by Poisson coefficient correlation of product moment in the previous term. Below are the formulation of hypothesis of this study. In point 1, the null hypothesis, there is no significant correlation between X variable and Y variable. And point 2, the alternative hypothesis, there is significant correlation between X variable and Y variable. From the formulation above, the writer follows some assumption as follow. In point 1, if the result of conclusion RO is lower than RT, R table RO lower T, the null hypothesis is accept and the alternative hypothesis AA is reject. In point 2, if the result of calculation RO is bigger than R2, R table RO bigger than R2, the null hypothesis is reject and the alternative hypothesis is accept. The result of recon value is bigger than reachable value with significant values, so this conclusion is the null hypothesis is reject and the alternative hypothesis is accept. There is positive correlation between student motivation in learning speaking and their speaking ability.
Conclusion. Based on the description of the data which described in the previous chapter, it can be concluded that there is significant correlation between students' motivation in learning speaking X variable and their speaking ability Y variable. After analyzing both variable by person product moment formula, it is found that Rxy is 0.555 based on the result of Rxy is 0.555. It indicates the gravity of correlation in this study is in the medium level. It is considered that there is medium correlation between students' motivation in learning speaking and students' speaking ability. Besides, by looking at calculating above, there is positive correlation between X variable and Y variable. It means that the student with higher motivation will get better speaking ability than the lower one. In other words, the more motivated students are, the better speaking ability can be achieved. Recommendation 1. For teacher, it is useful for teachers to improve students' motivation in learning speaking. 2. Education authorities, it can help in the learning process to increase their student speaking and their speaking ability. 3. For future research, the result of this study can be used as a reference for other researchers who are interested in conducting similar study.